Hello everyone, welcome back to 2 Pints In. I am Paul Beluid here with Jeff Schuella.
Hey guys, welcome back.
And our guest Daniel Quinn. We are sitting here at the corner of Saint Viateur and Saint Laurent. This El Kagibi or Kajibi
Hipville. We're in hipster town.
Hipster town cafe full of MacBooks and thick rimmed glasses. Like every single table.
I've got the glasses, but I don't have the MacBook.
I've got the MacBook. There you go.
Yeah, it's true.
We came prepared.
But I do have this strawberry and orange muffin. So.
Strawberry and orange muffin, which is very interesting. Seems to be awesome. And we're here with Daniel Quinn. Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, as Paul said, Daniel Quinn. We'll see what kinds of questions they have to ask me. I don't know if I'm interesting enough to be sitting here right now. But,
of course you are.
I have a few stories and a few anecdotes to share with you.
Well, we hear you regularly on CJD.
Yep.
I hear you, I think it's Fridays.
Every Friday from 10 to 11 on Tommy Schneemacher's political panel, the Week in Review.
Yes, exactly. And you're there with like a political panel. Tell us about how that works out.
Right. So I've been doing that for about 3 months now.
Okay.
So every Friday I'm on as the NDP representative. There's a representative from the Conservative Party, Jeff Norquay, who used to be, I believe he was Brian Mulrooney's deputy chief of staff.
Okay.
And Jennifer Crane, who is the Anglophone vice president of the Quebec wing of the Federal Liberal Party. Okay. She and I have actually known each other for several years. She had a brief stint as a New Democrat when she helped me during my campaign when I ran in Lac St. Louis in 2004.
Okay.
But now we're rivals.
Yeah.
On Tommy's show.
It's 9 years ago too.
Yeah. So she just brought you close to
Oh yes. She knows what she's doing. Yeah. And sometimes the discussions get pretty heated between us, but never personal.
Yeah, I heard that actually on Friday. It was personal. Mm-hmm. So there's some NDP bashing.
Oh really? Did you listen in on Friday?
Yeah. Oh, well, that was awesome. But yeah, so how long have you been part of NDP?
I joined in 2003 when I was it was my second year at John Abbott in Liberal Arts. Joined. First thing that I got to do was vote for Jack Layton in the leadership race in 2003.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you in 2003?
I was 19 years old at the time.
Okay.
But I had been involved in the Quebec Liberal Party.
Okay.
When I was, about 16, 17 years old. Okay. Worked a little bit on a provincial Green campaign, was involved in municipal politics, knocking on doors for local councillors.
Okay. So, interesting. Yeah. And what, because you were in your teens, you were in your mid-teens, and what brought you into that passion and interest?
So I would say a couple of factors contributed to my interest in politics. Number one, my first experience in politics was standing on St. Charles Boulevard in the West Island on the day of the 1995 referendum with two of my friends handing out Canadian flags to people as they were stopped at red lights.
Okay.
Do what I could to hold this country together. And then yet on Friday on CJD, my friend Jen Crane was basically accusing me of being a separatist, but that's a whole other story. And then when I got in high school, I started getting involved in the student council, became vice president, then became student council president in grade 11. So I was interested in national issues. The first one was basically the referendum. And then at the same time, through my involvement in student council, I got really interested in the whole concept of representative democracy and being elected to a position where you actually have the responsibility to represent people and their interests. And I remember reading the Gazette when I was about 16 years old.
Okay.
And there was a front page article about a Parti Québécois youth convention that had been held a couple of days earlier, and at the convention, Lucien Bouchard promised to hold another referendum as soon as possible. And I was like, all right, that's it, I got to do something. So I joined the Quebec Liberal Party and was involved.
And you really, it was really something that you wanted to become a part of, because a lot of people, they'll only go so far into what their commitment to this is, that you decided to take it...
Yeah, take it a step further.
Make it a career almost.
It more or less has been. I've been pretty involved since then, since I joined the party, the NDP, in 2003. Okay. I was a candidate 3 times in 2004, 2006, and 2008. Did not run again in 2011, so I missed the orange wave. But since then, I've been working for the party, and I worked for Lisanne Wanchette-Lamotte
Okay.
Excuse me, in Pierrefonds Dollard, the newly elected MP out there.
Okay.
Great young female MP. So that was a good experience.
And nothing in your childhood? You had any interest in elementary school or
Not really, and most people assume that I come from a very political family, which I do not. I mean, my father is certainly interested. He's far more conservative than I am. So, one, people assume I come from a political family, and two, that longtime NDP activists are in my family. I don't know if part of the explanation is the fact that my mother is a flower child compared to my more conservative father. I have an uncle who's an extremely partisan liberal. So that makes for some interesting discussions around the dinner table when I get together with family. No, but other than that, it was just through personal involvement, personal interest. I don't know if I can go far back enough and name all of the teachers who may have gotten me interested in history and politics and society.
I remember when I was in elementary school learning about Ed Broadbent, John Turner, and Mulrooney. I think that was 1988. There was that election, and we were I was kind of into politics around that election, but then my passion sort of died out a little bit after that. I was a young kid, so I didn't remember.
It sounds like you went to a good elementary school. I was only 5 at the time, so I wasn't able
at St. George's Elementary School.
Okay, St. George's, okay.
And I remembered those 3 names, and we were talking politics for a little while, and I was sort of interested in following, but I guess, I don't know, then I got into sports. And then it was all over after that.
As well.
Yeah, definitely.
I tried playing sports a few times. Turns out I'm not very athletic, so I just
I
started knocking on doors to get people to either vote for me.
That'll work too.
Yeah.
What kind of educational background do you have?
Okay, so I said that I got involved in the NDP when I was studying liberal arts at John Abbott. From there, I went on to Concordia, did a BA in history. Stuck around at Concordia, did an MA in history.
Okay.
Then I started teaching history at the high school level, St. Thomas, which is the
no
high
way.
school that I attended.
Oh, cool.
And then I did a year at Cooper Academy in Kirkland.
Okay.
And a year into teaching, I started a master's in teaching and learning at McGill, which is basically a new program designed for people like me who were already teaching but lacked full teacher certification. So it was to allow us to pursue that certification while at the same time continue to teach.
Yeah, continuing to teach.
And I'm still working on that master's.
Okay.
You teaching Canadian history, Quebec history?
The first year at St. Thomas, I was teaching world history to grade 7 students in French. So that was an interesting...
en français?
En français. And then so I taught them also français de base and then geography and history in French. So that was, ancient Roman and ancient Greek history and then the Middle Ages. And then at Cooper, I was teaching Canadian history and also, again, world history to 7th graders.
And did these students, did they know that you were involved, politically involved?
Yeah.
That's not something that you keep.
One of them found out and then they all went on YouTube and watched that video. And, I still have a fan page up from the 2008 election campaign, and I would say that 90% of the likes are high school students or former high school students in the West Island.
Nice. Well, at least you got your fan base.
Oh yeah,
happening.
they'll all be voting. Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, some of them are already.
Do you know if you were ever able to influence any students to go into politics that you may have been in touch with a few years later?
There are a few younger guys that I know now who are, active members of the NDP. They took out their membership cards. They've attended some of the conventions, and I think they were basically introduced to the party by me. Even though I never, tried to hide the fact that I am a New Democrat and I was a candidate, I always tried to be as critical and as impartial as possible when discussing politics with my students or when teaching Canadian history. I always much prefer just to put it out there on the table rather than try to
give
it. It's obvious,
of course.
But I always try to be fair with the other parties and even be critical of the NDP and encourage them to think critically and independently. And then my hope would be that if they thought critically enough and independently enough, that they would on their own come to support the NDP.
Of course.
But so you're what made you switch from the Liberal to the NDP?
I joined the Liberal Party because I said my main issue was national unity, and all other concerns were secondary. And then eventually, we started to move on as a society to focus on more important issues like the economy, the environment, healthcare, education. In 2003, there were 3 issues in particular that really got me to join the NDP. One, that's when we were in the process of debating whether or not to send troops to participate in the invasion of Iraq. The NDP was the first party to come out and say no way. The Liberal Party was still having an internal debate. 2, we came out in favor of decriminalization of marijuana well before the other parties. And 3, we were the first party to support unconditionally same-sex marriage. So those 3 issues, and I thought that the NDP was on the right side of those 3 issues, very progressive. And so it was actually the party's policies that got me interested. And then went to a convention in downtown Montreal, and I brought 2 friends along with me, including Julian.
Okay.
Yeah. A mutual friend of ours, for those of you who are listening to this.
Jugs, if you're listening to this.
Yeah, what's up?
And when we were on our way to the convention, we walked by Alexa McDonough, who was, who would be soon stepping down as the leader to be replaced by Jack Layton. And she saw like our name tags, and she said, "Hey guys, where are you going? Come join me for a bite to eat." We've eaten already. It's okay, I'll buy you a coffee. So we ended up sitting down with her and her advisor and went over her speech, and she paid. So that was basically like our first introduction to like the leadership of the party and how personable and approachable she was. And, that was
that is very
encouragement for continued involvement for sure.
Because that was probably around the same time. I think I saw 2 support rallies where I went for you. One was at was it Bishop Street Pub?
Oh, that would have been in 2006, in January 2006.
Yes. Probably. Yeah. That was. I think Julian was working there at the time.
Yes, he was.
I don't know if that was upstairs.
That was an interesting event too, because I started pouting halfway through because we left the West Island for this event and there was supposed to be a lot more people. But my campaign manager at the time, Jessica, who also is a good friend of mine, like calmed me down. She was like, "Just give a speech; it'll all be good." And ended up being okay.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Have you always been a good public speaker?
I've always enjoyed public speaking. I feel comfortable. I much prefer speaking without notes.
Okay.
And I do, before going on the radio every Friday morning, get briefed by one of our comms guys in Ottawa.
Okay.
And I realize that most of the time I prefer not being briefed. I usually, I'll go over what I'm going to say in my own head.
Right,
I much prefer just to speak naturally. And, not to say that create the impression that it comes from the heart, but that it, that I genuinely believe wholeheartedly in what I'm saying.
It's a good way to like center yourself, like before. But it's also the same. Like I guess that's where the comfort in being a teacher is as well, like standing the opposite way in the crowded room.
Yep.
So like,
I tried to be a dynamic, interesting teacher, which doesn't always work. Like, I learned this Canadian history; it's so interesting.
Yeah. But are they not? Do you find that students are just, especially now because there's like just ADD like all around? Is it tough to keep their attention?
My goal as a teacher was always try to just develop a rapport with my students and, positive relationships. So the way in which I interacted with my students just allowed for the establishment of a positive classroom environment. Mm-hmm. So I could tell if it seemed like the material was boring, or if I was boring, try to switch things up and sometimes do group work and then questions and answers and try to get them to read in groups, and I was always very approachable. I would joke around with them. Mm-hmm. So I think it generally put students at ease. And it's interesting too, just doing the masters, like it's, we've had all these profs at McGill with PhDs in pedagogy, and I would say the most important lesson that I learned in all these courses at McGill is that the basis of good teaching is developing a good relationship with your students.
Yeah, really.
And everything else is like secondary. Your expertise and the subject matter is even secondary to that.
It's true, because you have to get them on the same page as you, and you have to develop that rapport before you get anything accomplished, really, I guess.
Because why are they listening?
Yeah.
You got to give them their reason to listen to you, right?
It's almost like as a comedian too, though. When we're performing, you have to get them to buy into you as a persona first a little bit. I mean, it's good to have good jokes, but they'll be on board with you a lot more if they. It's a likability factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's this likability factor from the student to the teacher.
That's where trust comes from, and like their ability to open up to you makes a big difference.
I remember there's a great history teacher at Concordia. I have a BA in English and history. There's a Professor Carr.
Yes, Graham Carr.
Carr, and he was one of my favorite teachers at Concordia, and he taught me American history.
Yes.
And it was, I was interested in American history, but the way he did his lectures and his classes, I just, like the student-to-teacher rapport there, I just liked him a lot more, and I think I just got more out of it because of the I liked him.
Yeah, he's great. Too bad he's not really teaching anymore because he's...
Is he not?
He's in administration now.
I didn't know that.
At one point, I think he was still teaching a seminar, which is why I ended up taking American Cold War culture.
Right. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. He taught. Yeah. He was a good teacher, though.
Yeah, very good. Smart guy, very nice. Yeah.
Very cool.
Absolutely. I actually, in terms of developing a relationship with the students, I generally spent every lunch hour in the cafeteria, even when I wasn't scheduled to supervise, because I found it much more interesting to just be around the students than to sit in the staff lounge and listen to what my adult colleagues have to say. And I don't.
That's how you really. Like I studied human relations at Concordia.
Okay.
And one of the things that they said, like, if you ever want to just get to know anyone, just eat with them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simplest way. The same way, like, how you met his name from like the NDP, right? You just sit and you eat with them. It's really weird phenomena, I suppose. Like you really get like everybody's little quirks, and it forces you to sit with someone.
It's true.
Like confined, forced conversation. It's always great.
It's true, though. It's a good rapport builder, though, too. You're right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would generally just walk around busting balls too. That was always the best part.
Well, you seem like you have like a kid spirit, like a child spirit, like
oh, absolutely,
inside of you.
I'm like the most immature person I know. No, that's
But you seem like I'm 34. I guess you're
29.
29. Yeah, exactly. So you're a few years younger, but. How many people are involved politically at your age? Do you know? Like, do you know a lot of people?
A lot of the people I know at this point are people who are employees of the NDP or work for NDP MPs or are themselves members of parliament, in their 20s. And I spend a lot of time with them at this point. So, but I suppose my, circle of friends is not representative of society at large,
right?
But yeah. So
exactly.
I mean, I do know a lot of young people, but I'm also fully aware of the fact that generally people between the ages of 18 and 25 do not vote. It's only a minority of first-time voters who actually cast a ballot, which is very unfortunate.
What's that percentage exactly from
it varies from election to election, but at one point, 18 to 25-year-olds, I think it was something like only 30% of them were voting.
Oh, wow.
I mean, overall, the turnout is down to about 60%, down from the mid to high 70s in the 1960s and 70s.
Why do you think that is?
I think that, all of the corruption scandals, the impression that people have that all politicians are in it for themselves and are not actually interested in the greater good,
like
feeds into this cynicism.
Yeah.
And cynicism just turns people off of the whole political process, and then their disillusionment just unfortunately leads to them writing off all politicians as being one and the same.
Yeah.
And it's in certain political parties' interest to encourage people's disengagement from the political process, because then it's easier to, for them to get the support of their base, which only represents a minority of the overall population, and impose their agenda. And in the U.S., without getting into the nitty-gritty details, but the Christian right, the gun lobby, the anti-abortion movement, they always manage to mobilize their supporters. And so these minority views then end up governing the land, because far too many people who generally disagree with what's being done are so disengaged, and then they end up giving their elected representatives carte blanche. It's a bit of a bleak view of the political process. That's why even when I was a youth candidate as a teacher, my thing was always get out and vote, figure out what your beliefs are, hold your elected representatives accountable, get involved in a campaign,
take responsibility.
Do you think it's a byproduct of the Canadian identity of just being passive, being I don't know.
I think part of it might be the fact that generally speaking, people have a really good quality of life in Canada, so there don't seem to be any immediate pressing concerns, which I fundamentally disagree with. That we still have climate change, our healthcare system, schools badly in need of reform. Still seniors living in poverty, a child poverty rate of 17% in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, crumbling infrastructure, and these are all issues that matter. And so and everyone likes to complain about high tax rates, well, governments tax the population to be able to fund things like healthcare, education, infrastructure. So people want to have more of a say in how their tax dollars are spent to make sure that we actually benefit collectively from all the, the money that we're contributing to society. Then we need to hold our elected representatives accountable, make sure that they actually represent our priorities and our interests. It's easier said than done, but it takes that engagement on the part of the people.
Are there like any sort of solutions to getting more people to care about these issues? Like what I mean, I don't know, like do the parties work as a collective body to kind of send messages out that these are important issues and you think for yourself, but we really need more representation.
Especially from like the younger people. You can't just put like together like a Justin Bieber concert or something like that.
Right. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, individual politicians themselves have a responsibility to get involved within their communities and try to engage voters on a one-on-one basis. That's why during a campaign, knocking on doors becomes so important.
Yeah, it's that personal touch.
As a member of parliament, once you're elected, you have to be present on the ground within your community, attending everything from, a church social to a neighborhood barbecue. Yeah. So that, people can realize that you're approachable and that you can share your priorities and your concerns with your elected representative. I don't know if that's enough. And I think that because politicians and the political process itself, deal with such important matters, matters of war and peace, and again, determining how our tax dollars are spent. Sometimes the debates get very heated. Yeah. But it's so easy, especially with the 24-hour news cycle, for people just to get a snippet of what's actually happening, and just they develop a very superficial.
And they're like, I don't like that.
Exactly.
And they get
like,
passionate
look at all those
about
children in the House of Commons just yelling at each other.
Yeah.
Which does happen sometimes, but again, because there's such...
You're right.
There are diametrically opposed ideologies at play here, and people fighting it out to determine what the best course for the future of Canada is.
It's like a double-edged sword, pretty much.
Yeah.
Especially when people are like, they're so, like their blood boils about it. That's what, that's why politics, that's what one of the main ideas behind politics, especially like old people and stuff like that. Like, you just don't want to bring it up sometimes.
I don't know. I'm just always like thinking U.S. politics. I don't know what the voting rate is, but
it's about 50%.
It's about 50%, and they have the two-party system in general, I guess. And but I don't know. Is it because they're more like personalities or like?
Well, their media as well.
Yeah.
In the States, like their media plays a huge part, right?
Absolutely.
Are there provinces that have like higher voter turnouts, like, or it's kind of consistent across the board?
I mean, the turnout varies from province to province. I don't know the exact figures, but low voter participation is essentially common across the board, unfortunately. And even though like the turnout might be 60% in a federal election, 50 to 55% in a provincial election, forget municipal elections where the turnout might be 35-40%, school board elections, I don't know, 0.3% or whatever. But,
did you ever consider moving to Ottawa to be closer to the scene? Or
well, good question.
Yeah.
I go to Ottawa from time to time.
Okay.
I love being there for a question period, and I'm often there for some sort of all-staff forum, which usually ends with like a big party. Last summer we had a party at Thomas Mulcair's official residence at Stornoway. Nice barbecue.
The
in the
NDP party is
backyard.
a lot more fun.
That was great. We had a Christmas party in Centre Block, so 500
that's cool.
New Democrat staff members from across Canada. It was a tough morning the next day, that's for sure. But it's fun being there. But
he knows how to party.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm definitely happy being Montreal based. I love this city. And our office right now is on Saint Laurent and Mount Royal. Awesome location. I work with some great people
location.
there.
Yeah, very cool.
And when you work in Ottawa, you work in a bubble. You're totally disconnected from what's going on in the real world. The people who they work on the Hill, all their friends are also people who work on the Hill. When they go to the bar, it's the local NDP bar, and they're always with the same people, and It's very incestuous. It's a lot of fun, but you're totally disconnected from reality.
Yeah, I think that's Ottawa. That's like Ottawa in general.
Whether you work on
That's
Parliament
also
Hill or
true.
not, I think
You're pretty right about that.
That's the other thing. Who wants to
Yeah.
move to Ottawa?
Yeah, who does want to move to Ottawa? It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, we both go through Ottawa for comedy, and we're happy just to be there for a few days, and then we're happy to come home. I mean,
But they love it. They're so entertainment starved there. Like so entertainment starved.
they are. I mean, most of them either are involved with the government, work with the government. I always ask who works in the government. It's like at least 50% of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's a lot of young people, then the rest are either studying at U of O or Carleton.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically like the two the two people who are there.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh. So, do you always plan on staying in Montreal? Is that your?
Well, where I ultimately end up will not just depend on my career; it'll also depend on my wife's career. She's
How long have you been married now?
close to 4 years.
Okay.
And she'll be starting her final year of her residency at St. Justin. So when she finishes that, she's gonna either start her own practice somewhere in Montreal, or if she wants a hospital-based practice, then she'll have to go where the jobs are. Obviously.
Do you guys have different political views?
No, not
discuss
at all.
politics, or-
We often discuss politics. Anybody who's married to me would have to be subjected to that on a daily basis. No, she's definitely a New Democrat. She's a member of the party. She comes to the conventions. She always helped me out during the campaigns.
Very cool.
And I say that we agree on 99.9% of the issues. Maybe had some more heated discussions about the student movement, but generally speaking, on all the big issues, we are on the same side. That's
So
for
you
sure.
use the power of debate.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah,
in the house.
she gets annoyed with me sometimes. It's like, I'm trying to be emotional. You're always so rational.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you're a guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it is.
But I noticed that too. Like we were talking about that heated discussion or debate between Jennifer Crane and me.
Yeah.
I re-listened to it and I realized I remained calm and I was just rational and logical the whole time. And she resorted to these emotional pleas about how strong a federalist she is and how she believes in Canada. And
But
I
it's-
should have.
Yeah. So she
What
went off a
happens
little.
is like the more I don't know. This is what when I argue is like, especially like with my girlfriend or whoever. The calmer I get, the more emotional they get.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
the calmer they are, the more emotional I feel.
It's
you
true.
know? Like you're always trying to like balance it
She's
out.
like, "Why are you so calm right now?"
Yeah,
And then
she's like-
she escalates a little more. She's
my
like, "I don't
heart
like
just
this."
starts beating slower, and she's like, "Fuck." Just gets mad.
I think she hates the most during if we ever have, I shouldn't say a fight, but some sort of
Debate or
disagreement,
Disagreement.
is that when she's upset, I use logic and reason to convince her that she shouldn't be upset. And at the end of it, she realizes that I'm right, but she's still upset, so she's just gets her even angrier. That's it.
Have you ever like dated someone who had like you guys were debating and like constantly butting heads politically, or it was
I think because I'm so political and I'm such a partisan individual, it would be very difficult for me to actually be in a meaningful relationship
Right.
with somebody with diametrically opposed political views. I do, even most of my friends for that matter are New Democrats, progressive, social democratic individuals, with a couple of exceptions. I do like having friends or family members or just acquaintances who are thoughtful conservatives. I don't really have the patience for ideological, partisan, conservative individuals who just end up being obnoxious and always do want to fight. I'm always open to an actual intelligent, reasoned discussion about any issue. And it is sometimes for me a welcome change to have a conversation with somebody who actually disagrees with me on certain issues, because otherwise I'm just with like-minded people all the time, which is not healthy.
boring.
Yeah. I mean, mind you, we have a lot of fun, but
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
I guess it'd be tough to go through this interview and not mention Jack Layton at all. I was curious to know if you had any Jack Layton stories or anything that comes off the top of your head that.
the first,
share with
the
us?
first time I met Jack Layton was during the 2003 leadership race, right around the time when I became a member of the party. So there was this debate at Cégep du Vieux-Montréal.
Okay.
I showed up. I went into the debate thinking I was going to support Bill Blakey, a unilingual Anglophone MP from Winnipeg, and then I heard Jack speak French and English, and he seemed like a very competent guy. Spoke both official languages, And so I went up to him after the debate, shook his hand, bought a copy of his book on homelessness, the making and unmaking of a national crisis, which he wrote in his capacity as the former head of the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, who was always really interested in municipal issues. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. But a guy was standing right next to me and said, Mr. Layton, I want to ask you about a controversial issue, the whole question about the decriminalization or the legalization of marijuana. And Jack's like, don't worry about it. It's not controversial at all. I'll tell you the truth. I smoked it, but I never exhaled. So I was like, that was my first encounter with Jack. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's up? Is that the opposite of what Clinton said?
Yeah.
I never
exactly. That was that was the reference.
That's
so it was
awesome.
great. So right then and there, I knew Jack was a really funny, approachable guy, and we had this other event at Les Beaux-Arts.
Okay, where is that? Where's Les
Saint Laurent and Marianne, just down the street from our office. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to one of the party organizers at the time, and she said that Jack had to hail a cab, and he was going to have to head back to his hotel. And I said, I have my car. Why don't I give him a lift? She said, really? You don't mind? Sure. She gave me the name of the hotel. I can't remember what hotel it was. I told her I knew where to go. So brought the car around. Jack hopped in. He was like, thanks for the lift. I was like, well, it's not every day that I get to drive a future prime minister back to his hotel. So we were just chatting. I was nervous. I was 19, 20 at the time.
Yeah.
From the West Island, had no idea where I was going, and I think I drove around, the
GPS.
same block for a second time, and Jack sort of looked at me. He's like, "You said you knew where you were going, right?" Yes, absolutely. And then but then before we knew it, Jack's like, "Okay, there's my hotel." Stopped at a red light, hopped out of the car, and ran across the street. So that was cool. I did, get to meet him on several occasions at events back when the NDP was a more marginal party in Quebec. He would show up to a bar and there'd always be the same 40, 45 people there. So everybody, got their FaceTime with him. And then in 2011, when I was not a candidate, it was obvious that something had changed because I was waiting outside of Olympia, which is where we held our big campaign rally. Okay. And when his campaign bus showed up, out of nowhere, you saw 15 cameras surround the bus. There were security guards. Passers-by would see the bus like, "Oh, Monsieur, c'est lui, c'est Jack Layton."
Wow.
Or as a lot of francophones said, Monsieur Clayton. So I was like, wow. And as soon as he got off the bus, you weren't getting near him. The cameras and the security guards. Yeah, exactly. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is I was privileged enough to be able to attend his funeral, which itself was an amazing
Where was
experience.
the funeral?
In Toronto at the Oscar Peterson Hall. That's
Music Hall.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was great. Sitting in the same room as Stephen Harper and all former leaders of the NDP. His wife was there. Stephen Lewis delivered an amazing eulogy. For me, it was emotional. I mean, there were a couple of people shedding tears around me, but it really did end up being a celebration of his life. And it was designed also to motivate the NDP troops. Jack started something. What he would want us to do is not give up and keep fighting the good fight.
I remember living in Olivia Chow's riding when I used to live in Toronto.
In Trinity Spadina? Yeah.
Trinity Spadina. I lived at college in Bathurst.
Okay.
And I never met her. She's still involved?
Yes, absolutely. Might be running for mayor.
Okay. Oh, wow.
That'll be interesting. I don't think she's made up her mind just yet, but
okay.
Yeah, that should be great.
A lot of support for
I wonder how those two met. You don't know any story on how those two...
Well, I know they served on Toronto City Council together.
Okay.
They were considered the two radical left-wing councillors, and at one point they were living in a subsidized apartment block. And but they were paying full price because between them they were making $150,000 as councillors. When the right wing media found out about that, they were calling them hypocritical champagne socialists taking away a subsidized housing unit from the poor. When these guys are university educated councillors making close to $100,000 each. And every time the NDP did something good and we were doing better in the polls, at least one newspaper would bring that up again. Jack Layton and his wife who used to live in the subsidized housing unit.
They're always looking some way to tear people down.
Even if you remember, I shouldn't be bringing this up if no one else does. During the 2011 campaign, about a week before Election Day, when it was clear that the NDP was going to make some major breakthroughs in Ontario and Quebec, an article appeared, I don't know if it was first in the National Post, about Jack Layton having gone to a massage parlor.
I remember this.
Yeah, there were rumors that it was more than a massage parlor. Where did this come from? They may have happened back in 2000, 2 or something.
Yeah, but that's what always happens, you know. When it comes
Very
to the
timely,
big day,
of course.
Like look at the Super Bowl too. You know that they're doing to Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis
like,
took this deer antler spray. He was on an HGH or something like that.
Now it's like right before it's happening.
Of course.
So it always sucks how the media tends to like taint like, you know, the big day.
But sometimes their strategy backfires.
Yeah, exactly.
Because after people read that, they're like, "Oh, Jack seems cool."
Yeah.
The
Jack
just
is
kept
cool.
skyrocketing.
Jack should be wearing a cape. Should have had a cape, or just an eagle on his shoulder, maybe.
But so I guess we'll wrap it up in a couple minutes. But like, so what is it where do you think Montreal, like this city, what are your main points and where you think that it'll be in the next like 5 or 10 years?
That's a good question. I always have to look at Montreal from, you know, the perspective of a West Island Anglophone, but I love the fact that it's a predominantly Francophone city that is nevertheless very bilingual and multilingual and multicultural. That's part of the beauty of Montreal. So I hope that you know, we could continue to bridge the gap between the two main linguistic groups, and that's really what should propel Montreal into the future and attract businesses and attract scholars and attract people of all walks of life, artists and everything. So I know that when people think of Montreal and Quebec, they think of crumbling infrastructure, you know, flooding on McGill. But to me, that's secondary to what the city has to offer in terms of its culture, the people, the festivals, the restaurants that we have here, the nightlife, just the overall, you know, vibe that defines this city. I'd say it's the best city in North America. But I say that, you know, having spent my whole life here.
But also, like, I don't know, anytime I leave this city, I'm always like, Montreal's pretty awesome. You know, like, you know,
still is.
I spent some time in Toronto, and I'm like, 1:30 last call. Montreal is pretty awesome. I can't wait to go back home. But yeah, you know, like, I think the more people come here, the more they realize how crazy wicked this city is. I don't even know if that's a good way to describe it, but
it is. And it is. I mean, it's very much a North American city, but obviously with the European influence,
Flair,
the fact that, you know, it's the largest non-English city in North America. There was probably a better way of articulating it. But anyway, you know, it's officially a French city, but again, as I was saying, it's very multi-linguistic or multilingual and multicultural. We have world-class universities, research centers, world-class artistic festivals and cultural venues, and it's great.
I feel that we're at the most critical point here. Like I feel like the next 5 years are like very critical for this city and for this province in terms of how it's viewed by everyone outside. I don't know, maybe because of the minority government now, or it just feels like infrastructure is such a huge thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little worried about Montreal, but like it could, like you said, we're trying to bring everything together, and I don't know what's going to happen to this place. Like I don't know if I'm going to still be here in 5 years. I'd like to. I love living in Montreal. I love the people. I'm worried about where the city is going now.
Because we've heard. In our other podcasts, we've heard people talk about who's Dennis, who was saying that being an Anglophone in Montreal, you're part of the most distinct cultures.
It's true.
Anywhere in the country, because you go somewhere else, they're like, "Oh, you're from Montreal," and then they're like, "Wow, you speak English so well."
Exactly. well, I noticed that about, you know, Anglo-Quebecers who, within Quebec, they're totally like, "I'm Canadian, I'm Anglophone." And then as soon as they leave Quebec, they realize exactly how different their culture and their worldview is from the rest of the members of the Canadian Anglophone majority. And then suddenly they become like the most nationalistic Quebecers. And, people start, I don't know, you could bash the PQ all you want here, and then you leave the province and you listen to what people from out west have to say about the PQ, and suddenly you find yourself defending Pauline Marois. You don't get it at all. It's not that bad. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. But I'm always curious to know, like, I do get to tour across the country. Paul does a lot of the same thing, and I always like to see how people in different provinces view us here in Quebec, and it's funny because like the further out I go to Alberta, going to BC soon, and like it feels like it's on another planet.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's great. I do love this country. I love the different identities.
Yeah, this is a giant country as well. You know? We're especially with like the internet, and, like everything feels so much smaller. But like, there's a lot of land. Like, it's
crazy,
really crazy country. So.
And then you go to Cornwall, Ontario, which is like 60 minutes away, and it's like a whole different planet. You know what I mean? It's like just 60 minutes from here. It's a different world.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty lucky.
We're pretty lucky. I love living in Montreal.
Even within, I mean, Quebec, you have so many different cities and communities and regions. In my capacity as an organizer, I've managed to travel quite a bit throughout the province. Been to Quebec City a few times recently, Trois-Rivières, throughout the eastern townships. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the riding of Mégantic-d'Érable, spent the afternoon in a small town called Stratford with the former mayor, who is potentially our candidate in that riding in the next election. So, but I do love, and what's interesting for me is traveling the province. Obviously, I conduct most of my work in French, and sometimes I'm running training sessions or chairing meetings where obviously 99% of the people are Francophone Quebecers, and obviously they detect my accent, but there's never any tension, or you don't sense that people feel uncomfortable with the fact that there's like some Anglophone Montrealer who's going en région to chair their meeting. So, I mean... So
they're relatively like welcoming?
Absolutely.
Open-minded, and they're not going to close you off because of that.
And have you ever had is there like a crazy story where like people were like, no, it's never happened?
Honestly, no. The only thing that it almost always happens is after the meeting, people are like, oh, now you have to drive all the way back to Ottawa? And I was like, no, I live in Montreal. They're like, oh, wait? Mais tu viens d'Ottawa? No. West Island. Okay.
That's awesome.
They're like, that's in Ontario though, right?
That's
might as well be.
Yeah.
So anything else?
I feel like I learned a little bit today, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Really appreciate that.
All right. So thanks.
All right. You're welcome. Great.
All right. Thanks once again for listening in, everyone. We keep having these amazing guests over here at 2 Pints In. So if you guys have any feedback, questions, queries, or guest suggestions, you could always reach us at 2pintsin@gmail.com. And that's 2 Pints In with the number 2. Thanks again, everyone.